Thank you, Raju, and thank you everyone for joining in. Thank you, Dr. Shobha, for kindly agreeing to join. I think we are meeting through ECO for the first time. Welcome to our ECO session. So this is basically foundation course, and we have doctors, as mentioned in the email, from various parts of the country as well as outside the country, and most of them are uh, intensive, like all disciplines of specialities, I guess, or almost from all specialities. And thank you so much for agreeing. And Dr. Shobha is the head of the department and professor in Amrita Institute of Medical Sciences, Cochin. Before that, she was working with St. John's Hospital in the Department of Pain and Palliative Medicine for quite a long time. And she has done so much of work there, integrating HIV care into palliative care, emergency medicine, referrals to palliative care. So she has a rich experience in terms of cancer as well as non-cancer palliative care for many, many years. Thank you so much, and it's a great privilege to hear from you.
Thank you, Sridevi, for that wonderful introduction. I've seen people from different parts of the world. Am I right in it, thinking that way, or is it only from India?
We have participants from Maldives, UAE,
Is it only from India or?
No, ma'am. We are having participants from Maldives, Singapore, UAE.
Singapore. Right. Okay. So I think when I speak, that is not getting through to you immediately. I think there is a lag time, if I'm not wrong.
Ma'am, we have off your video, so now your audio is clear.
Yeah, okay, fine. So we'll continue with that. So I'm going to share my screen, and I understand that you've been discussing opioids for in pain management, and you have kind of covered the weak opioids up till now. So Rajlakshmi, can you enable me to share my screen, please?
Sure, ma'am, will do it. Yes, ma'am, you can do it now.
I hope if we can see.
Yes, ma'am, we can see your presentation. Dr. Shobha?
Right. So I think it is going to be a discussion.
Ma'am, your voice is breaking badly.
Through this. So if you can't hear me for more than, say, 15 seconds, can you stop me, please, Raju?
Sure, ma'am, we'll do it.
Sure. Okay, so next slide, please. So as I said earlier, I don't know whether you heard me, we're going to discuss commonly used opioids, mechanism of action of opioids, practical aspects of opioid use. So I'm sure like you would have listened to weak opioids in the previous class. So today we're going to concentrate on strong opioids. Next slide, please. So you've seen this before, which is the WHO analgesic ladder, which is 3 steps. And step 1 and 2 you would have discussed earlier. The point to remember is to take step 1 to step 2 and step 3. And step 2 has weak opioids and step 3 has strong opioids. And we don't take weak opioids to step 3. Okay, so there is a thing saying feeble audio. Am I audible now a bit more?
Yes, you are.
Okay. So next slide, please. So here's a patient, Mr. X, who's in severe pain. Next slide, please. He's a 56-year-old man with carcinoma of larynx, pain around the neck, which is 10 on 10 on the numerical rating scale, sharp with no radiation. And the last 2 weeks he's having this pain and is unable to sleep. How will you manage? Do you want to provide some answers in the chat box?
Please
So yeah,
type your responses in the chat box so that ma'am can read. What do you think?
Dr. Sandeep said analgesics.
yeah, I'm asking you which analytics, if anybody wants to contribute. So he's got pain, severe pain, which is 10 on 10, the worst possible pain. Paracetamol, surgery done, opioids. Which one? You're talking about morphine, yes. Yes, severe pain can go directly to step 3, that's nice. Morphine, step 2. Somebody wants to start on step 2, there's nothing wrong in that. Okay, morphine. A lot of people think you need to go to morphine. Fine, okay. Now, how do we start morphine? How do you think we should be starting morphine? Can we start morphine straight away because he's got severe pain? What do we do to find out what dose is suitable for this patient? Do you want to type it? So we've decided on morphine and you don't know the dose. So, okay, 10 milligram 4th-hourly, 2 to 3 milligrams. Okay, 5 milligrams 4th-hourly. Okay, 2.5 milligram 4th-hourly. Okay, 4th-hourly dose, weight-based and titrate according to response, 4 milligram QDS. Okay, all answers can be said right. But before we come to a decision, PRN, okay. Before we come to a final decision, I think there is a way that we can find out what is the amount of morphine this patient would need, okay. When the patient comes and says 10 on 10 pain, his physical pain might not be 10 on 10. Someone else has said 5 milligram Q for H, fine. There might be a lot of contributing factors. I'm sure the introduction on pain would have been taken before, and you know the concept of total pain, wherein there's not only physical pain, but there's also psychological and social and spiritual aspects of pain. So sometimes what happens is the psychological aspect, thinking about what's going to happen to the next of his skin, or he's come away quickly and there's some unattended task that he had to finish. That itself can cause a lot of distress, and that can add on to that pain. So all your answers are right. 5 milligrams, 10 milligrams, he's in severe pain, 10 on 10 on numerical rating scale. There is a way to find out what is the amount of morphine that is required to control his pain. Next slide, please. Yes, holistic approach, I agree. Okay, so Mr. X is sitting up after our intervention. So what did we do? Next slide. Intravenous morphine titration is what we did. So what we normally do is when a patient comes with severe pain, we immediately secure an IV line, okay? An IV line, or you don't need to have a Venflon. You can do with a butterfly needle. Okay, you secure that immediately and give metoclopramide. Next slide, please. Next point, yeah. Metoclopramide, 10 milligrams IV stat, and then start with morphine, okay? Before I go any further, I think I should say thank you to my colleague, Dr. Sunil Kumar, whose slides I've borrowed literally, and then I'm talking on that because he's prepared it the way that we would like a foundation course slides to be. So thank you, Sunil. So metoclopramide 10 milligrams IV stat and injection morphine 1.5 milligram IV at 10 minutes interval. Now, mind you, before you start this injection morphine, there are certain things that we need to look at. Okay, first, if there is any blood reports available, suppose a patient has impaired renal function and we would need to go slow with morphine, that doesn't mean that we're not going to give them morphine. We definitely are going to start this patient on morphine because he's got severe pain. Right. The other thing that we would look at is auscultate his chest, and if there's any bronchoconstriction. Exactly, the respiratory status is what Dr. Sandeep is saying. Exactly. So patients who are asthmatic are prone to bronchoconstriction and with sudden introduction to morphine. Those people who are opioid naive. Mind you, we would reach the step 3 after step 2 maybe, or directly to step 3. Most of the patients that we see, we reach step 3 after trying step 2 and step 1. So, but then we still need to be careful. If there is a bronchoconstriction or bronchi that when you auscultate, you bronchi you listen to when you auscultate, I think you need to be extremely careful. Still doesn't mean that you're not going to give morphine injection, but then you have to have oxygen bronchodilators and other stuff next to your bed. So what we normally do is we record the pulse, blood pressure, respiratory rate, and just to be on the safer side, saturation. Next slide, please. So the end point is, so we've started this, we record this, we give them injection metoclopramide, we give them 1.5 milligrams of morphine. We ask how the patient is, and then we wait for 10 minutes, again assess the pain, and repeat every 10 minutes 1.5 milligrams of morphine. Now, what are the endpoints? The endpoints are 1, satisfactory pain relief, or the patient is becoming very sleepy, whichever comes first. Okay, the patient is really drowsy, there's not much of pain relief, but the patient is very sleepy. We stop the IV titration. Okay, or the patient has satisfactory pain relief. Now, satisfactory pain relief according to the patient. Remember, pain is subjective and not objective. So you can't measure like you measure the blood pressure. So what is satisfactory for the patient is what we measure. Satisfactory pain relief is one endpoint. Next slide, please. So suppose we've started at 10 hours in the morning. You can record, you can have a small table like this with a pulse rate, respiratory rate, and blood pressure recorded. Pain score 10, drowsy or not, no. Then you repeat the injection 1.5. Keep repeating it every 10 minutes, and the pain pain score becomes 1, and then you stop. You can even stop when there's no hard and fast rule. It's by your own intuition, your clinical acumen, your own experience, and help from your seniors. A more experienced nurse, they are really good, and they would guide you as to how to titrate morphine if they're experienced. Okay, and then we stop the morphine trial. Next slide, please. So we've given the IV morphine, say 4.5 milligrams IV morphine with good pain relief. So what do we do to convert this into oral? The patient has come to the OPD, he has got good pain relief, he doesn't want to get admitted, he wants to go back home and wants some tablets so that he can take it home. So how are we going to convert this to oral dose? Could you type it in, please? IV into 3. Okay. Anyone else? Anyone else? Remember, this is our initial titration. This was not a patient who was on IV continuous infusion, and we are converting that into oral morphine. 10 milligrams 4-hourly, IV into 4 milligrams TDS. Okay. Anyone else? Right. Okay. Next slide. So what we do is we always, round it off to the nearest multiple of 5. Okay. So this patient has got 4.5 milligram. Remember, the doctor who wrote into 3 is absolutely right, but then this is not a continuous infusion. This is morphine titration. We're trying to find out what is the dose of morphine which is more suitable for this opioid naive patient or somebody who's been on step 2, right? Okay, so we round it off to the nearest 5. This patient has got 4.5 milligrams, so you make it 5. If the patient, had pain relief at 7.5 or 8, then we can round it off to the nearest one, which is 10 milligrams. For this patient, it is half of 10, which is 5 milligrams every 4 hours. So in a patient who's got severe pain, 10 on 10, renal functions good, then we need to start every 4 hours of morphine because it works only for 4 hours. Okay? And the bedtime dose, we normally double it so that the patient does not have to get up at 2 o'clock in the middle of the night to take his next dose of morphine. There's always this option of SOS dose of morphine. Next slide, please. So we start with 5 milligram of opioid in opioid naive patients and 10 milligrams for those taking weak opioids. I would say, okay, we need to go with caution. We need to be assessing different things to, make sure that we are doing the right thing. There's no harm in actually starting with 5 milligrams every 4 hours if you have any doubt that 10 milligrams is going to be too much for this patient. And you can always say that you can take an SOS dose in between if you have severe pain. Now, there's something called end of dose pain. That means you take a tablet at the end of 3 hours or 3.5 hours, the patient is having the next bout of pain. And because it's not covering the 4 hours that it should be covering. So that means the dose is a little less and you can go up on the dose. But we would always say, please take SOS and tell me how many doses of SOS you have taken in the past 24 hours. Next slide, please. So this gentleman was started on tab morphine 5 milligrams every 4 hours and SOS. And he was relatively pain-free for 2 weeks. And he was very happy, always come to this doctor. This doctor saved his life. He goes happily and at home he's comfortable. And then suddenly we get a call. We always tell our patients to give us a call if there's a problem, if you have more pain or if you feel sleepy, etc., etc. We always tell the relatives to do that. Okay, we also call and check on them whether they're doing the right thing. And there are a lot of organizations like Pallium India who does home care. Unfortunately, we don't have that in our center at the moment. So we always make it a point to have telephonic follow-up with our patients. And we find out that he needs 4 SOS doses of morphine per day for the last 4 days. So what should we do now? Can you just type it in, please, in the chat box? What do you want to do now? So he's on 5 milligrams every 4 hours. At night, 10 o'clock, he's getting 1 tablet. And in the past 4 days, he's having 4 SOS. So total dose is 35 milligrams now. I will increase total 45 milligrams total. How do we give that? So every 4 hours, what is the dose that you want to give, Dr. Sandeep? Anyone else? Sublingual dose of morphine. We don't have a sublingual preparation of morphine. We have buprenorphine sublingual, but that's another drug altogether. 7 milligram Fodali, okay? That's would be difficult to divide the dose. Your 0.5 would be a bit more easier. Okay, 7.5 milligram Fodali, yes, Marina? Yes, 7.5 milligram, right, okay. So you've got the hang of it. So he's had 4 SOS doses. Now, that's what he says, but we are kind of, we want to be cautious. We're not completely taken. We don't see the patient. This is like, they have told us, and of course we need to trust the patient. But what we do normally is, next slide please. When 2 or more than 2 PRN doses are taken, increase the dose by 30 to 50% every 2 to 3 days. Okay, 30 to 50%. So 30 to 50% of 4 doses of morphine is total of 20 milligrams, half of which is 10 milligrams. So we can, increase 5 milligram dose to 7.5 to 10 milligrams Q for it, which most of you got it. So absolutely spot on. I appreciate the person who wrote sublingual because he probably wanted to give a quick relief kind of a thing, and add on to the pain relief, which is a good thought. But here we are talking about oral steady dose. Okay, next slide, please. So how frequently would you give SOS dose of morphine? Now there's this confusion, once you've given morphine, okay, I've just given at say 8 o'clock. Okay, you've given for the first dose at 6 o'clock, pain is not coming down, severe pain, you've given an SOS dose at 8. And people say, oh, we've just given an SOS dose at 8, so I'm not going to give the regular doses at 10. Or you've given the SOS dose at 8 o'clock, so I'm not going to give an SOS dose at 9. Is there any restriction like that? How many SOS doses can you give in a day? Can you type it in, please? So Dr. Sandeep was saying SSRIs can be considered. So that was adjuvant analgesics. Of course, it can be considered. Right now, we are talking about titrating morphine to 24 doses. Dr. Sunil Mohammed, I didn't understand that. As needed to control 24 doses. Oh, you mean to say 24 SOS doses? Okay, no restriction for SOS doses is what Dr. Sandhya says. All right. Okay. As per patient need, as many times as needed. Fine, great. Okay, 2 doses. If increase more than this, need to revisit total dose. Right. So, ideally speaking, there is no restriction to doses. Next slide, please. No restriction. Yes. Watch out for any respiratory depression. Okay. Can you go back, Raju? Please. Can you go back? Right. So, we say there is no ceiling dose for morphine. Okay, that is because of the pharmacological property of morphine. It acts on the mu receptor to produce pain relief. Main action is on the mu receptor to produce pain relief, and there is no ceiling dose there. The other receptors, if they act on that, or if there is an antagonistic and partial agonistic action, those drug molecules have a ceiling dose, but morphine does not have a ceiling dose. And somebody who has said 24 times, we probably don't reach that number of SOS doses, because by our intervention, when it is more than 2, when it's 2 and more, we are actually titrating up the doses. And we will be having a regular dose, an increased regular dose, which will control the pain. So what I want you to understand is there is no ceiling dose for morphine. People can take as much as they want, provided there is no respiratory depression, their pain is under control, and they are not drowsy. Okay, but we don't go up till that many numbers, so we're not too worried about SOS doses. Next slide, please. Next slide. Okay. Am I audible now? The sound
yes,
is low, I was told. Okay. So morphine is available. It is a natural compound. It is available from Papaver somniferum, the most important opium in the poppy alkaloid. Okay. So how many of you have seen this picture and have recognized this as poppy? Have you seen it before? Yes? Yes, okay. Yes, all right. So when you see this picture and you say, oh, lovely, so this is like, poppy flowers. And it symbolizes something else too, poppy flowers. Do you know what that is? Especially in UK. Right, this is slightly off the track, just to keep your interest and not to make you sleep. So the Normandy landing for World War II. So people are remembered, and they have this poppy day. The soldiers who laid down their lives in the Normandy beach, they have their grave there, and so poppy flowers are actually stuck on as labels in UK, and they honor the forces who laid down their lives in World War II. Okay, that's besides the point. So this is morphine flower and the pod from which, and different parts of this pod you can actually yeah, now the first Canada used as memory of veterans, fine. Okay, you can actually synthesize so many products from this, right from hashish to our own morphine. Okay, next slide, please. So what is the pharmacokinetics of morphine? I hope you understand the difference between pharmacokinetics and pharmacodynamics. Yeah, pharmacokinetics is what happens to the drug in your body, and pharmacodynamics is what the drug does to your body in simple terms. Okay, pharmacokinetics is divided into absorption, distribution, metabolism, and excretion. Next slide, please. So now the property of this opium alkaloid, it's an alkaloid, it's a weak base, it's not an acid, and it gets absorbed in the alkaline medium of the small bowel. It is hydrophilic, which is slow onset and longer duration of action. Slow onset and longer duration of action. Next slide, please. First past hepatic metabolism, it is swallowed, gets into the GIT, absorption happens into blood vessels, portal vein into the liver, and metabolism happens when there is cytochrome P450 enzymes, and there is systemic circulation. All of us know this. It's a no-brainer. Next slide, please. So it is mainly in the liver, 90% metabolized. Some part of it gets metabolized even in GIT and kidney. Okay, so 45 to 55% is morphine 3-glucuronide, and 5 to 10% is morphine 6-glucuronide, which is the active component giving pain relief. Okay, so whatever we take, it is a small percentage of the metabolized compound that gives us pain relief. Next slide, please. How frequently would you give SOS dose of morphine? We have already answered that. So that's what we were, and then we deviated into the pharmacological properties of morphine. Okay, let's get on with our story. Next slide, please. So we put Mr. X on 10 milligrams of morphine 4-hourly for the next 6 months. So he comes to you. For the past 6 months, he's been on that. He was brought to you with excessive drowsiness. On examination, it was found that he has serum creatinine of 5 milligrams per deciliter. Will you do anything with morphine dosage? Can you type it in, please? So we're still with our Mr. X, who was doing well with 10 milligrams of morphine every 4 hours over the past 6 months. Suddenly he comes to you with drowsiness and fine, and creatinine is high. What would you do? Of course, we will reduce the dose. Yes, decrease the dosage. Yes, decrease the dosage. By how much? Is there any other option other than decreasing the dosage? Decrease dosage, yeah. Observe him as well because he's drowsy. 1/3 reduction. Any other option other than decreasing the dosage? Hydration, decrease frequency. Yeah, I mean space it. Yeah, that's right. Any other option? Switch to fentanyl. Add a different analgesic. Opioid sparing. What does that mean? Opioid sparing? Are you saying, Sabita, that we need to stop opioid? Is that what you're saying? Dialysis, Chetana Karwal, yes. What can we do immediately? We can calculate the GFR and optimize the dose. Yes, that can be done. Mainly in liver. But the active metabolite, which is morphine 6-glucuronide, is not excreted because of the kidney failure. The creatinine is 5 milligrams. So you've got the active component in the system and it's not removed. Okay. Fine. Okay. Let's see what can be done. So the first and foremost thing, if the patient is really drowsy, what I would do is I would immediately stop the medication. Okay. 10 milligrams, immediately stop the medication. See how the patient is in the next few hours. And if he's complaining of pain, if he's waking up, if he's complaining of pain, then start in a reduced dose. Yes, I agree with you. You can, have a reduced dose, reduce by 50%, but this creatinine is really high. We would reduce to 50% if the creatinine was, say, 1.45, 1.5, 1.6. then we would probably reduce it to 50%. But this is really high, 5 milligrams per deciliter. So we can actually stop the medication and reassess the patient, see whether he's toxic with morphine. The respiratory rate is low, saturation is low, then we can definitely give an antidote like naloxone. So we'll come to that in a minute. But here we can always stop the medication, observe how the patient is in the next few hours. I would say the next 4 hours, we would keep a tight vigil over this patient and see how he is. And if he's complaining of pain, of course, restart the medication at a lower dose and with, the frequency also is increased, or the spacing between two doses, not the frequency is increased, frequency is decreased, and the spacing between two doses is also increased. Next slide, please. So excretion is by glomerular filtration. Morphine 6-glucuronide accumulates in renal failure, so clearance is decreased and the half-life is prolonged. So for Mr. X, increase the spacing, like somebody said, that's great, and make the dosing TID, reduce the frequency with which that we would give, and reduce the dose of alternate opioids. Alternate opioids. So it's a little difficult to think about alternate opioids at this juncture because tramadol in renal failure is equally, it's more dangerous than morphine, I would say, because it lowers the seizure threshold and people can have fits if you introduce tramadol in a person who's having 5 milligrams of creatinine. So what is the other alternate opioid that we can give immediately, which is fentanyl, and that has to go as an infusion. The patch, which if we are going to put fentanyl patch, which is available, that's going to take ages for its effect. So I would say, you can safely stop, observe the patient, and or reduce it to a tiny dose, maybe 2.5, 3 times a day or something of that sort. It will come with experience. Okay, next slide, please. So Mr. X was sent home and is now taking, we've sorted all his problems. We found out that he was not, drinking enough water. He was not, he was taking some tablets mistakenly. Maybe he was taking more without realizing that he was taking more. Somebody was giving him that kind of tablet at those many doses, etc. So now he's taking morphine 5 milligrams 8 hourly. So after 2 months, he was unable to swallow anything, including morphine. So this patient has been with you for the past, say, 8 to 10 months. You have a real good rapport with him, and the family members now call up and say, he's not able to swallow anything and he's in pain, so what do we do? So what will you do now for pain relief? Any answers, please? Fentanyl patch or IV somebody has put? Okay, this was for the previous one, okay. Fentanyl patch, because you can't take orally, you can take fentanyl, okay, sublingual. But morphine, again, we don't have a preparation. Sublingual morphine we do not have in India. A patch, fentanyl patch, okay. Anyone else? Patient is not able to swallow. There are so many other things that we can do, of course, like, NG tube, and we can insert it and to keep the medication, things like that, which is a pain for the patient, basically. Fentanyl patch, subcutaneous, yes, that's a good answer. Anyone else? Right, okay. So we've given sufficient time. So next slide, please. Let's look at the routes of administering morphine. Intravenous or subcutaneous. Next slide. Next, keep on doing it, Raj. Yes. Oral, rectal, epidural, intrathecal, and sublingual. Sometimes we've done that also. We've kind of, there's a hospital called Kidwai in Bangalore where they have morphine solution. They don't have morphine tablet. They prescribe solution. The advantage of the solution is that the mother solution, the concentration can be increased to whatever extent you want. The patient would still be taking 5 ml or 2.5 ml, whatever that is, but the concentration can be increased or decreased according to the whims and fancies. Sometimes when I used to work in St. John's in Bangalore, we would try sublingual. We'll get the solution if the patient can't have any other way of getting morphine. if we want to send the patient home with that, because we can't give them subcutaneous injections at home. It becomes difficult if they're staying in the border of Karnataka and Andhra. So we would give sublingual morphine solution. We would tell them how to dilute it and things like that. So we used to get that from Kidwai, or we would send them there. We had a very good pharmacist over there who would prescribe precisely what is to be done. And so that. Okay. Next slide, please. So preparations of morphine, it is an aqueous solution. There are tablets available. Injections are aqueous solution. So it is it can be mixed in water for injection. Okay. Immediate release tablets are available. Controlled release tablets are also available. Normally in India, the injections are available 15 milligrams per ml ampules. Next slide, please. So here's another patient, Mrs. P, who is on 50 milligrams of morphine every 4 hours. She attends your clinic with severe pain. You have injection pentazocine and oral morphine tablet. I feel that we've not kind of completed the other patient, Mr. X. So we have, we've got a call saying that the patient can't take orally, and we say, okay, we can give the patient subcutaneous route, but they can't do it there. They'll have to bring the patient to us, and we have to start the subcutaneous route. What dose do you want to start? The patient was on 5 milligrams 3 times a day, because he became all very drowsy, 10 milligrams Q4H, and we reduced it to 5 milligrams 3 times a day. The patient is coming over to you in severe pain, and you want to start a subcutaneous dose. What dose would you give? Any answers? 7.5 milligrams subcutaneous, a good start. Anyone else? This is where the other thing applies. Somebody had said IV into 3. So same thing happens. Oral divided by 3. And we know that the patient was on 5 milligrams 3 times a day, like 15 milligrams in a day. And if you want to give subcutaneous, you can divide it by 3, which is 15 divided by 3, 5 milligrams for us. And please don't forget to put SOS dose of morphine injection subcutaneous. Okay. And we have a habit of actually writing up 2 to 2.5 milligrams of morphine SOS. Okay. It depends. If you feel that the patient will become too drowsy with just half the dose of 24 hours, then you can start on 1 milligram SOS or 1.5 milligram of SOS. Your clinical intuition of how much the patient will want, you will get it, you'll acquire it over time. But it's safer to slightly underdose than to overdose, so be cautious when you do that. Okay. So will not subcutaneous effect be slow as compared to peroral? No, the peroral oral thing will get some more time. There was a question. So subcutaneous is much more effective. It forms a depot, and it's not as effective as IV, which acts immediately. Subcutaneous will take some more time, but it is much quicker than oral administration. All right. So we've come to Mrs. P on 50 milligrams of morphine every 4 hours. Not clear about the subcutaneous dose calculation. Okay, somebody is saying, Dr. Sandhya, yeah. So we said that the oral dose, total oral dose in 24 hours divided by 3 is the subcutaneous dose, or divided by, let me think. Okay, divided by 3 is the IV dose basically, and we're talking about subcutaneous dose. Yeah, thanks for correcting me. So subcutaneous dose can be divided by 2. Okay, divided by 3 is IV dose. So the total of 15 milligrams of oral dose divided by 2. So what Dr. Sandeep wrote was absolutely right. Is 7.5 milligrams of the total oral dose divided by 2, so which is 7.5 milligrams, which is in 24 hours. But I would say you would still start on 5 milligrams to be on the safer side, just to make sure. And suppose the patient has come in, it's not able to take orally, there is pre-renal failure, and the kidneys are not functioning. So I would go, with caution and start the patient on 5 milligrams, put the patient on SOS dose, and instruct the nurses in the ward to give SOS dose as much as the patient wants. Okay, so shall we move on to this next patient, Mrs. P? Right, Raju, please go back to previous slide. Yes, 50 milligrams of morphine Q4H, and she attends your clinic with severe pain. You have injection pentazocine or oral morphine tablet. How will you manage? How will you manage? So Dr. Sandeep was asked, subcutaneous is twice a day of oral IV, twice divided by 2 of IV doses. You know, in India, we take it as 1/3 is IV of the oral and half as of the oral as subcutaneous. But in UK, they take both subcutaneous and IV as half. There is no 1/3 concept for some reason, for some strange reason. So that is why I also, because you know, I've also practiced in UK, so you get this confusion about 1/3 or half. Either way, it is good. Okay, so if you have any doubt, you convert it to oral dose, IV to oral. In India, we can in 3 times. In subcutaneous, if it is subcutaneous, into 2, and then calculate it back. So how do you give subcutaneous dose at home? It's very difficult. You know, you have to train those people. We can't do that. So we have to ask them to go to a nearby place. And most of the small hospitals, even big hospitals, people don't know how to put a subcutaneous line and how to give subcutaneous injections. So we always say, we tell the nurses, you have experience in taking insulin injections. It's just the same principle. It's subcutaneous, and you know, you can continue doing that. So subcutaneous frequency, somebody has asked. This is a continuous infusion that I was talking about, which is 5 milligrams over 24 hours. Okay. Right, continuous infusion subcut. Okay, coming back to our pentazocine and oral morphine tablet, how will you manage? Do you know what pentazocine is? Did you learn about it in last class? Pentazocine, injection pentazocine? Yes, 4-pill, that's right. Okay. So you have injection pentazocine and oral morphine tablet. How will you manage? Patient is already on 15 milligrams of morphine every 4 hours. Okay, so that means 6, 5, 30 is almost 300 milligrams of a little more than that this patient is getting. Right, okay, let's have a look. Next slide, please. That's 4-pill injection. If this is half equivalent to morphine, we'll come to that in a minute, Dr. Sandeep. Okay, next slide, please. Yeah, oh, sorry. So now we're talking about opioids. So this is just to let you know that different opioids includes everything, pentazocine, morphine, etc., etc. So a general term which includes naturally occurring semi-synthetic and which produce their effects by combining with opioid receptors. The whole thing is called opioids, stereospecifically antagonized by naloxone. Okay, next slide. So what are the receptors of opioids? I talked about mu, kappa, delta, and there's something called sigma, which is not a true opioid receptor, as action mediated through it are not reversed by naloxone. Next slide, please. It is found in several areas of the brain, particularly in periaqueductal gray matter, spinal cord, and peripheral nervous system. Sorry, yeah, I was just going to say we have only 15 minutes left to finish because there are a lot of discussions and questions going on. So, okay, let's see whether we can utilize this 15 minutes the fullest. It includes a discussion also. So, we have only 30 minutes now, Sridevi. Okay. Several areas of the brain, spinal cord, and peripheral nervous system. Next slide, please. So the classification of opioids based on the receptor, okay, agonist, antagonist, and a mixed one, agonist, antagonist. In that itself, we have partial agonist and mixed agonist. Have all these, it's so confusing. Okay, next slide, please. So what are agonists? Agonist is a drug which has an affinity for and binds to cell receptors to induce changes in the cell which stimulate physiological activity. Agonist opioid drugs have no clinically relevant ceiling effect to analgesia. We've discussed this already. Next slide, please. So the agonist and the dose relation. As the dose is raised, analgesic effects increase in a log linear function until either analgesia is achieved or dose-limiting adverse effects supervene, which is drowsiness, respiratory depression, etc. So it is kind of straight. This is linear, which is easy to titrate. Next slide, please. These are the agonists which are available. So now morphine, codeine, pethidine, fentanyl, tramadol, etc. are available in our country. Dextropropoxifen was available before. It used to be part of Proxivon capsules before. We had paracetamol and dextropropoxifen in it, which is kind of scarce at the moment. So pethidine, tramadol, morphine, codeine, etc. is available here. We don't have pentazocine is available. We have methadone also at the moment. Just a couple of years ago, we are licensed for methadone to be used as an analgesic. It was there for de-addiction. Next slide, please. What is an antagonist? Antagonist drugs have no intrinsic pharmacological action but can interfere with the action of an agonist. So if an antagonist sits in a receptor, it does not produce any effect other than blocking the agonist. Okay, so competitive antagonists bind to the same receptor and compete for the receptor sites. Next slide. So what are the antagonists that we are aware of, which we use? Naloxone and naltrexone are the antagonists available. Next slide. So agonist antagonists, such drugs have a ceiling effect for analgesia. So although they produce analgesia in opioid naive patient, they can precipitate withdrawal in patients who are physically dependent on morphine-like drugs. Agonist at one receptor and antagonist at another. This is why we say, please do not give weak opioids and different kinds of opioids to time. Sometimes this is seen inadvertently because we have buprenorphine patch used left, right, and center by different specialties like orthopedic surgery, etc. When they go home post-op pain, buprenorphine, and then they're put on tramadol as well. So the analgesic effect of tramadol is actually blocked by buprenorphine. We'll come to that, or pentazocine. We'll come to that at the next slide. Next slide, please. So pentazocine or Fortwin or buprenorphine, Tidegesic is the brand name, the most popular one. So pentazocine has got an antagonistic and agonistic activity, and partial agonist has a lower intrinsic activity on the receptors, but ceiling effect is there, and net reduction in pharmacological action when administered with an agonist. So the agonist is actually displaced by this partial agonist. A strong agonist like morphine is displaced by buprenorphine. So it is definitely not wise to combine the two. But sometimes what happens is when the patient is on a buprenorphine patch and the patient has to have SOS opioid, and suppose you don't have a sublingual buprenorphine tablet, then sometimes we are forced to give morphine SOS, and we've done that before. So it works, but then it needs more dose of morphine to actually control the pain. So remembering this pharmacological property is going to be useful. We have buprenorphine patch available, we have sublingual buprenorphine, so you can always titrate it. That becomes easier. Next slide, please. So pain relief, which is linear in agonist. Agonist and antagonist, you can see that it takes a curve, and the agonistic pain relief activity becomes a little bit of a plateau. Next slide. So mixed agonist antagonistic activity, which is pentazocine prototype drug, has agonistic effect at kappa receptors and weak antagonistic effect at mu receptor. So we know that morphine is mu agonist, and pentazocine will replace morphine from mu receptors. It's not a good idea to give again Fortwin and morphine because of the same principles. It displaces the pure agonist from mu receptors. Next slide, please. Choosing the opioid. So Mrs. X is on 50 milligrams of Q4H, and she attends the clinic with severe pain. You have injection pentazocine and oral morphine tablet. How do you manage? Next slide. I'm not going to ask the question. So what we did was, for this patient, we're not going to give pentazocine. We are going to titrate. We are probably making sure that she takes it on time, and then absorption is okay, or whether we should go into injection morphine from somewhere else, whether we have to get that, but we don't give pentazocine in this patient who is already on morphine. We make sure that all the other aspects are looked at for pain relief. Okay, next patient is Mr. P. Sorry, Mr. P, 70-year-old man has carcinoma of the lung and is complaining of throbbing pain on right front of the chest, continuous 5 on 10. He's known epileptic and is on phenytoin 100 milligrams BD. How do you manage his pain? What do you want to give this patient? The pain is 5 on 10 and the patient has got seizure, is on phenytoin. Which drug would you prefer on this patient? Anyone? Dr. Sandeep is saying morphine, yes. Or benzodiazepine, NSAIDs. Yeah, that's good. Okay, so we are specifically talking about which opioid that we would be using. Someone said morphine, I think it's Dr. Sandeep. Anyone, anything else? Tramadol. Reno Maman has said tramadol. Now, tramadol would be a little tricky. Non-opioids by someone else, PSGH, I don't know who that person is. Tramadol, basically not buprenorphine patch. Again, it will take some time for its effect. It will take longer than phenytoin patch, even is what we would say. It acts, it starts acting, but to get the full effect, it takes longer than that. Okay, with NSAIDs. Okay, let's go to the next slide, please. So we're almost there. We have only 5 more minutes before the next presentation. So now we're going to talk about weak opioids. We'll come back to that question in a minute. So we're going to talk about codeine, which is 1/10 as potent as morphine. Main metabolite codeine 6-glucuronide, which is it is a pro-drug of morphine. Okay, it's not different from morphine. Bioavailability 40%, onset of action 30 to 60%, and duration of action is 4 to 6 hours. And it is highly constipating, even more than codeine. Next slide, please. Pain relief, cough suppressant, antidiarrheal. That's why I said highly constipating. It's used as an antidiarrheal. Next slide, please. Dextropropoxifen, it is not available in India, but probably in your countries, in UAE. Principal metabolite is not propoxifen. Potency is 1/12 that of morphine. Okay. Steady state is reached after 3 to 4 days of regular administration, and duration of action is 6 to 8 hours. Next slide, please. Now, coming to tramadol, it not only acts on opioid receptors, but it also inhibits reuptake of serotonin and noradrenaline, just like the tricyclic antidepressants. So that means it acts on the inhibitory pain pathway, where you have all these concentrations of all these neurotransmitters. So that is why tramadol is much more useful in a neuropathic pain, even more than morphine. So, for example, herpes zoster, herpetic neuralgia, we would prefer tramadol in that severe pain instead of morphine because of this property of tramadol, the anti-neuropathic property of tramadol. Okay, this another drug which acts like this is methadone. We'll come to that in a minute. Next slide, please. So potency is 1/10, 1/5 of oral morphine, parenteral 1/10, and high bioavailability. The beauty of tramadol is 80% of it is available orally. Okay, bioavailability is very good. The other aspect is it lowers seizure threshold. So in that patient, we were talking about phenytoin, 100 milligrams. The patient was taking for seizures. So tramadol is definitely not a good drug to start because the patient has only had only medium pain, 5 on 10. So our tendency is to go to step 2, and the easily available drug is tramadol. So, but we can't start on tramadol. So maybe we could start on morphine, a lower dose. That would be perfect. Okay. Dose limiting side effect is nausea, duration of action 4 to 6 hours. And I have always seen prescriptions being written injection tramadol with injection MSET, which is, it doesn't work that way. So injection MSET, it inhibits the serotonin and thing that we're talking about, 5-HT3 receptor. So the pain relieving neuropathic effect, anti-neuropathic effect of tramadol is inhibited by this MSET. You could give another antiemetic like metoclopramide. We always see in hospitals this combination being written, which is not pharmacologically viable. Next slide, please. So Mrs. K, 55-year-old man, Mrs. K, 55-year-old man with carcinoma. Okay, so this Mr. K with carcinoma of colon has abdominal pain, continuous 10 milligram morphine, Q4H No, it is Mrs. K. And she doesn't require any SOS dose of morphine. Sorry for the confusion. Her doctor has asked them to place 25 micrograms patch. Okay, next day patient reports to you telling that they threw away the fentanyl patch after 5 hours as she had no pain relief. Next slide, please. So, fentanyl patch was thrown away after 5 hours and saying that the patient does not have pain relief. So, let's look at what are the preparations of fentanyl available. Just intravenous, transdermal, oral transmucosal, and it is lipofulline. Next slide, please. You know, you always have this request from different oncologists and other specialties asking the patient is having severe pain, can you put the patient on a patch? And first of all, they don't understand that we need to titrate and find out what is the dose of fentanyl patch that we need to put the patient on, and it won't give immediate pain relief. The effective analgesia occurs after 18 to 21 hours. We need to keep this in mind. If the patient is on morphine, you have to continue the morphine tablet till the next day on those 18 hours. And the effect of the fentanyl patch lasts for 72 hours. And we have to remove the patch in 3 days. So skin condition and temperature affects absorption. So you can't put it on a hairy place and things like that. So you need to be careful. And you need to put it in a place where it doesn't peel off effectively. So in females, you can put it subclavicular. For males, maybe on the arm inside. If there's hair on the chest, it becomes difficult. So not suitable for patients with unstable pain, fentanyl patch. Next slide, please. So unstable pain and stable pain shown here. Next slide. So fentanyl is 100 times more potent than morphine. 60 milligrams of oral morphine equals 25 micrograms patch. Okay, we always take it as 60 to 90 milligrams of oral morphine. Okay, we can start the patient safely on 25 micrograms of fentanyl patch. There are different strengths available, 12.5 to 100 micrograms is available. Next slide, please. So this 60-year-old woman with carcinoma of buccal mucosa with lymph node metastasis on the neck is complaining of burning pain. She's receiving morphine 20 milligrams, amitriptyline 75, pregabalin 115. Also complains of myoclonus, delirium, drowsiness, which is disturbing. Next slide. So what do we do is the question. So go back, please. Okay, so here we are talking about myoclonus delirium, and this is a no-brainer in the sense you're supposed to reduce morphine to control this myoclonic jerks, delirium, and drowsiness. It's purely toxic dose of morphine, so you need to get back on that and see and reassess pain relief for this patient. Next slide. Now I'm not going to talk too much on methadone because that in itself is a topic on its own. Okay, like I said, tramadol and methadone has anti-neuropathic activity as well. So that way it is a good drug. Methadone, maybe we need to have a separate lecture on methadone if people are interested. And it works only if you're actually going to get methadone in your unit. It's very easy to learn about it and then forget about it. Unless not you use it regularly, you're not going to have that. Next slide. I think we're going to stop. Next slide. Equipotent dose of methadone. I'm not going to go through that. Next slide. Side effects of opioids. Yes, of course. Please keep on pressing, Raju, which is constipation, nausea, vomiting, sleepiness, itching, and dry mouth. Constipation is a major complaint which the patient does not get tolerant to, and then we have to give a stimulant laxative and a stool softener. So bisacodyl is a must, and a stool softener which would be Cramafin Plus, which contains a softener and a stimulant. I'm sure like you will have a lecture on laxatives if we have not finished that already. So there are different categories of laxatives, and for opioid-induced constipation, it is a must that you give stimulants, laxatives along with softeners. Next slide. Okay, so vomiting and nausea, we know if it is morphine-induced nausea, vomiting. Again, nausea, vomiting is a topic on its own. The drug of choice would be haloperidol. You must be wondering why, because morphine, which is a drug, which is a foreign thing, it acts on the CTs its own, and the most effective drug for nausea, vomiting is a dopamine, anti-dopamine agent, which is injectable, that is available as haloperidol. Next slide, please. Haloperidol, metoclopramide, domperidone, all these act on the CTs. Next slide. And sleepiness and tiredness is the other side effect, occurs in about 1/3 of the patient. It is self-limiting, it gets better. Next slide, please. The toxic effects, as you know, pinpoint people is something which you're going to look at. Delirium, myoclonus, drowsiness. People just, as yesterday kind of had a vivid dream, or I saw somebody in the room, who I haven't met so long. The patient who's died some time ago, somebody who's died some time ago, and I found them in my room. So this is like typical hallucination, visual hallucination. So which points to a finger at the patient is getting toxic. You need to be careful. You need to speak to the patient, take a history properly. Next slide, please. Respiratory depression, yeah, it can produce respiratory depression, but it's absolutely unusual if we titrate the dose properly. Next slide, please. Next slide. This is something which we are really worried about, addiction. So in cancer patients, I wouldn't worry too much about this because there is severe pain by titrating against pain, and that is not so much of a problem. But in non-cancer patients, we are extremely careful. For example, pancreatitis and different connective tissue disorders who gets referred to us. HIV patients who get referred to us. So we're extremely careful that we don't put them on strong opioids. So again, addiction is a topic on its own, psychological and physical dependence. When it becomes psychological dependence, it becomes proper addiction. Physical dependence, you have withdrawal symptoms. Okay. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide. Now, pharmacoeconomics, what does it cost in India? Morphine, it's very cheap, 3 rupees 30 paise. Methadone is also another cheap drug. If you look at tramadol, that's the most expensive one. And of course, fentanyl patch, which is very expensive. Next slide, please. That's it. So if you have any doubts, you can ask. I think we've used the discussion time as well, and I've overshot by another 5 minutes. So it's 4:05. So the other person can have the presentation. Maybe we can have the discussion after that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. As you said, you have taken up a lot of questions in between.
Yeah.
So ultimately, that is the mission, that they should ask questions and needs clarity. Thank you so
That's
much.
right.
Is there any other important questions before we move on to presentation? And yes, we will get another 15 minutes or so after the presentation of Dr.
Exactly. What they can do is they can type in the questions now, and
Yeah.
Sridevi, you can highlight those questions at the end,
Yes.
and we'll try and answer it together.
Sure.
Okay.
If there is no pressing question right now, we can move on to presentation by Dr. Priyanka. Over to you, Dr. Priyanka.
Good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Ma'am, can you speak a little more louder?
Hello. Good evening, everyone. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. Okay. We can start. So we have a 51-year-old male with a diagnosis of cancer of the esophagus with metastasis. He came to our palliative care unit with complaints of swallowing difficulty since 1 month, pain in the entire chest, back more than the front, right hip, and both knee since last 2 weeks, unable to sleep due to pain. Next, please. Next slide. Okay. So he was initially okay with his swallowing difficulty, but eventually he could not swallow even a small bit of solid food. Though he could eat some semi-liquid food, chest pain was continuous in nature, which was sometimes associated with breathing. So at times he used to hold his breath, which would lead to breathlessness. He initially had 2 cycles of radiation therapy, after which he discontinued. He's a smoker and an alcoholic, but stopped since the last 2 months. He had no other comorbidities. Next. He's a thin-built man with an average height. Pain over the chest, entire chest is continuous. Initially, the NRS score was 5 to 6 out of 10. Later, it increased to 7, 8 out of 10. Pain occasionally increased on breathing. However, there was a hard swelling over the right side of the chest that was tender on palpation, fixed to the underlying rib. Burning and pricking sensation over the right hip and both knee. Vitals were normal. Sleep was disturbed due to the pain, and bowel and bladder habits are normal. Next, please. So his investigation, he been of 9 gram percent. His kidney function test and his liver function test were normal. His upper GI endoscopy showed ulceroproliferative growth in the esophagus. Biopsy showed poorly differentiated squamous cell carcinoma. And CT thorax abdomen showed an ill-defined circumferential wall thickening in mid and lower esophagus with hepatic, pulmonary, and skeletal metastasis. So his psychosocial aspect, he was a businessman. He stayed with his second wife, who is a housewife, and 5 children. He's divorced with his first wife and had a bitter relation as of now, though their son does take care of him. After being diagnosed with the advanced stage of cancer, patient family decided not to continue with the palliative chemotherapy due to financial constraints. And now he is financially dependent on his sister and from the son of his first wife. So the medications that was given to him were, initially we started off with tramadol 50 mg TDS for 10 days, then increased to 100 mg TDS for 5 days. But as I have already said, the NRS score was initially 5 to 6, but it eventually increased to 7 to 8. So we converted it to morphine, and morphine was given at 10 mg 4 hourly for 3 days, but again reassessed and was continued with the dosage of 20 mg 4 hourly. Along with it, tablet aceclofenac 100 mg plus paracetamol 325 BD after food, pantoprazole 40 OD, ondansetron 4 mg BD initially, later on SOS, pregabalin 75 mg HS, bisacodyl 10 mg HS, and for breakthrough pain, tablet morphine 15 mg was given. Along with this, multivitamin syrup and ointment for local application over the heart swelling over the rib area was given. So the main concern for the patient was the pain control. Even after giving so many medications, the pain was still making him uncomfortable. So he wanted to have a good pain control so that he can be comfortably with his family. His children are all young and studying, so their financial security and marriage of his first daughter or the eldest daughter is the main concern. Next, please. So in the summary, he is a 51-year-old male diagnosed with cancer of the esophagus with metastasis to lung, liver, and bone, came with dysphagia and continuous pain in the chest, knee, and hip. Next, please. So for the discussion point, pain control, financial issues, family support system, and the nutritional support. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Priyanka, for your presentation. I would like to ask you one question before going on to discussion. So after starting morphine, still he is in pain? Is that what you...
Yes, ma'am. Initially, when we started off with 10 mg 4 hourly for 3 days, he was like waxing and waning situation. He was not having a continuously pain relief. So I thought let us increase the dose and then see for it. But with 20 mg 4 hourly, he is comfortable.
Okay. Without any side effects, without any toxic effects, right? With 20 milligrams
No.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So I would like to ask the participants before we ask Dr. Shobha for her opinion. Would you like to ask anything regarding his management? Would you like to say something about the existing medication chart? Or the issues she has asked, like how to manage the financial issues, how to manage the family, and how to support his nutrition. If you can't speak, you can type it in the chat, or you can just unmute yourself and talk. Anyone has any opinion from your side after hearing ma'am's presentation? So there is one suggestion about replacing antiemetic from Emisset. I did not understand the second chat. Is that a question? Pain control not enough?
Dr. Anupama, can you unmute and speak, ma'am?
Is that a question? Like, is it the pain control not enough, or you are telling to increase the medications? I'm not clear. Anyone else would like to comment on the pain management of this particular patient? We have heard ma'am talking for an hour regarding the management of pain. Is the pain breakthrough pain or yeah, very good question.
Yeah, it was basically a breakthrough pain because he had to take, someday he would take just one dose of extra dose of morphine or few days twice, not more than that.
She has asked whether the pain control is good with 20 milligram of morphine or not. The pain, was it controlled with 20 milligram?
20 milligram, 4 hourly, not TDS now.
Okay, so is it, so she's asking you whether it was controlled
Oh.
with 20 milligram?
Yes, yes, it was in fact controlled.
So can you go back to the analysis or the
Medications,
medication slide, please? Right. So there is an NSAID. There's a combination that you give aceclofenac and paracetamol 3 times a day, and morphine 20 milligrams 4th hourly, and you had good pain relief is what you're saying, isn't it? Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't think if the pain relief is good, then you don't need to change so much. What works well, you don't have to tamper with it, right?
Okay.
And with breakthrough pain, you're giving 15 milligrams. You need to give, you're giving 20 milligrams, total of 6 doses every 4 hours, 6 doses,
Yes, ma'am.
120.
120.
Yeah, fine. Okay. Multivitamin syrup ointment for local application. So your first question about pain relief is addressed,
Yes, ma'am.
which is, Sridevi is asking OTFC. Is it oral
Someone has,
transmucosal fentanyl thing? So it is oral transmucosal fentanyl. It's not. It's a lollipop kind of thing.
okay.
Okay. OTFC.
Ma'am, I wanted to ask whether
Yeah.
me doing this medication, like starting off with tramadol and then changing it to morphine was
Yeah.
a good decision, or should I have started with morphine itself?
So when the pain assessment was done,
Yes,
what was the pain score at that time? Which will
yes,
give
ma'am.
you a rough idea. Yeah. What
Yeah,
was the pain score?
initially he was having 5 to 6 out of
Hmm.
10, the NRS score.
Yeah, that's fine. Perfectly fine. You could start tramadol, provided there's
Yeah,
no contraindication like renal failure
yes,
or seizure. If the patient has sometimes brain metastasis, they are on anti-epileptics already. Like
yes,
so, if those kind of patients, it's better to sort of steer away from tramadol. There's no other go. There's nothing else available. Yes, you can still give tramadol.
okay,
That's not a problem. So, but then you did right. You gave tramadol and then you moved on to morphine and you had adequate pain control and you titrated. Sometimes, if you take a lot of time to control the pain, the patients might become disappointed. So, within 24 hours, if you can achieve pain control, that's the best. If it is severe pain, within a few hours, you can't wait
yes,
for the patient to be tortured for 24 hours.
okay, ma'am.
There are many suggestions regarding talking to family,
So your next
addressing.
question was like financial and psychological issues. Does anyone have any? Yeah.
There is a question coming up. After how many days or hours
So
should we have
yeah,
started
financial
morphine?
issues. What was?
There is a question
Yeah,
on
we'll answer
pain
those
control.
questions in a minute. Pain control. Okay.
After how many days
After
or
how many hours a
hours?
day
Yeah.
should we have started? Oh, you can start it immediately. Suppose you give tramadol and the pain relief is not adequate, you're not happy with it. You give the next dose, a couple of doses, and the patient is still writhing in pain. Then we would straight away go to morphine. There's no hardcore time frame that you need to wait for 24 hours and then, go to the next step. Provided your assessment is right, if the patient is having severe pain.
And there is one more question: is the antiemetic of choice is Emicet or something else?
For morphine.
Yes, that was the
No,
question.
morphine, definitely not. I'm sure you will have a class on nausea and vomiting, but just
Yes,
for
yes.
your information's sake, morphine induces nausea vomiting by 3 methods. Okay, one is, like we said before, your morphine is circulating in the blood. It washes over your CTZ, which is a chemoreceptor trigger zone, and the receptors there are dopamine receptors predominantly. So you have to block those receptors, and we can give tablet haloperidol or injectable haloperidol. We can give 1.5 milligrams, 2 milligrams, 2.5 milligrams, depending on what would suit the patient. If the patient is well built, you can go in even for 2.5 once a day, once a night is enough. So antiemetic of haloperidol is a drug of choice for morphine-induced nausea vomiting, which is the drug of choice for all toxic nausea vomiting. Okay, if you have uremia, if you have hyponatremia, if there is an electrolyte imbalance in the blood, haloperidol is a drug of choice because that gets reflected on CTZ more than anything else. Okay, so that's one mechanism by which morphine causes nausea vomiting. The other mechanism is it stimulates the cochlear area, the semicircular canals, and that causes giddiness and can cause nausea vomiting in morphine taking patients. So you counter that with your usual motion sickness medications. Like it has an, you have this, what is it called? Evomin, antihistaminic and acetylcholinergic medications, scopolamine and those kind of buccal patch that you can put to control your motion sickness. Those are the things, that medication we can use for morphine-induced nausea and vomiting. The other thing that causes nausea and vomiting is plain constipation in morphine induced nausea vomiting, plain constipation. So constipation needs to be treated in order to prevent nausea and vomiting by morphine. So what do? We add laxatives. Like I said, you need to have a stimulant laxative and a softener. Okay, so the hand that writes morphine always writes a laxative. That is a must. Now, when we talk about nausea vomiting in morphine, in patients being given morphine for the first time, this is a side effect which will settle just like drowsiness within a few days, within a couple of days. But an initial thing, if the patient is completely, vomiting, that's not a good thing. The patient will not want to take that medication. And mind you, the nausea and vomiting is much more in tramadol than morphine. Yeah. So in tramadol, please do give metoclopramide rather than MSET. The effect of tramadol is taken away. You can give injectable like metoclopramide. You can give domperidone, which would be effective. So MSET is not a drug of choice for morphine-induced nausea vomiting. We have this habit of actually blindly writing MSET for all nausea vomiting, which is wrong. Okay, it is a 5-HT3 antagonist, and that works specifically for CINV, which is chemotherapy-induced nausea vomiting. Why? Because chemotherapy stimulates the 5-HT3 receptors all throughout the gut lining. That's where it acts, isn't it? We have mucositis, we have diarrhea, we have constipation, and there is shedding of these intestinal lining, and that's when the 5-HT3 gets stimulated. It's a peripheral mechanism, okay, more than the central mechanism. So that is why we give ondansetron for chemotherapy-induced nausea vomiting, which is not the case in morphine.
Thank you, ma'am.
Sorry, any other questions? Haloperidol as antiemetic will be 2 milligrams, yes, 2 to 5 milligrams, you're right, yes.
A question on extrapyramidal side effects of
Side effects, yes.
haloperidol.
Yeah, so that is something which you need to look at. But then when you give haloperidol, of course it is a typical antipsychotic and it has more side effects when compared to atypical antipsychotics like olanzapine or risperidone or quetiapine. So you we need to be aware that that is a possibility. We need to keep your eyes and ears open. But we give haloperidol not for many days together. We give it for a short time and then take it away. But then these patients who are on haloperidol already are sometimes getting on dancetrone. So we might be starting haloperidol for example, delirium. Okay, so the patient might be on dancetrone already, or maybe on metoclopramide as an anxiolytic for some other thing. Now, all these drugs combined together can be dangerous in the sense they can give EPS, extrapyramidal side effects, or much more dangerous thing like a QT prolongation. And if the patient is on methadone, that's an added thing. So there are a lot of things in this. And since this is a foundation course, I don't think we need to go into so many details. But we need to be aware that the drug of choice for morphine-induced nausea vomiting is haloperidol. Yes, it has got EPS. Yes, it can produce a prolonged QT interval, and it can cause cardiac arrhythmia. But we need to monitor those and keep in mind that we are doing safe, evidence-based medicine.
Thank you so much for the inputs from your side. And can we just go through the financial issues and other questions that she has?
Right. Finally, financial family support. And somebody has said that there's the son from the first wife or his former son is helpful, so that's a good thing. So there is some family support, which is good.
There is another input there. You can ask an NGO support.
Yes, that's great. Okay. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. That
Yeah,
would be
and
helpful, ma'am.
see, there are so many, sometimes we miss these things in India. There are so many government, funds available, which we are not aware of. And we tend to overlook those things. And it might be a pain to go behind them. But then if we have a designated person, like a social worker, to get the Prime Minister's Relief Fund or CM's Relief Fund or, something of that sort, we can always yes, GoFundMe.com, those kind of things. So that can be helpful. Anything else by the presenter herself who can add in financial issues?
Mm. Yeah, he was being supported by his sister also. So,
Yeah.
but apart from that, he's internally there is no family income as of now. So that is what is bothering him. How many days his sister is going to have? This is the issue that he said. Like when he spoke to us, he said, "How many days is my sister going to look after me?" So that becomes a concern for him.
Right. So yeah, so there is a family support as well, isn't it? So his sister's helping him, his wife is looking after him, isn't it right? Yeah.
Yes, yes, ma'am,
Yeah.
definitely.
So there's this psychological issue. Probably he's not abandoned. There's no stigma there.
Yes, ma'am.
So that is there. So that is taken care of. But again, he must be feeling very lonely in this. I mean, very low and lonely in the sense like he will have to leave his family and go, and that he has not secured a future for his children, right?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
So those kind of things that comes with financial issues as well. Is there somebody like someone said NGO who can support his family later on, things like that, or a small job for his wife,
Yes.
who can look after those things. Now comes the nutritional support. Any input for that? These are major
I would like
issues
to
in
ask Dr. Priyanka, what is the reason for dysphagia?
Ma'am, because of the
Yeah,
growth.
esophagus.
Yes,
Is
yes.
there any other correctable reasons? I'm asking whether there is any candidiasis, which is very, very
No.
common in terms of dysphagia. We may not actually checking that. Just wanted to
Ma'am,
make sure that you have.
yes, as of yet, no, ma'am, that is not the problem. He's from initially when he was diagnosed, he was saying he had some difficulty in swallowing food, but eventually, as the size is increasing, he's not being able to take any kind of solid food, even a soft solid also he's not. So he's completely on like soups and like almost liquid food. So even the morphine that we are giving, it is being crushed and being given with water. And we have yes, we have asked for rice tube feeding, but he is not very open to it. He's reluctant because he's saying that till now I'm being able to have something, but the wife and all, they're concerned that only the medications we are being able to give, but what about the food? He's not taking adequate food, for which he's getting weaker and weaker.
People are asking about exactly the same. Why not tubes? And
Yes,
how are
ma'am.
you giving so many tablets? Is it not difficult to take?
Yes, ma'am. that is the issue we are facing. We are trying to explain him that Riles tube will make him feel better, but till now he is reluctant to take the tube.
Ma'am, would you like to comment
Yeah.
on that? What if the patients tell you
Yeah,
that I don't
absolutely.
want a rice
So,
tube?
yeah, so I think first of all, we need to go by the patient's wish.
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am.
So, what does the patient want? We need to sit down patiently with him and to explain. And also, I think he should understand that even if he's rice tube fed, at some point that's not going to work either, and the family should know about it. So if they're reluctant to take that, then that's fine. So you can always explain that he probably is going to, aspirate and have chest infection and then needs to get admitted and things like that. So if he does not want rice tube, so you can always reassure him that we're not going to force you and put you on a rice tube unless and until you want us to do that. You can say that alternatively, of course, by now you're not going to give him parental nutrition and things like that, which is highly inappropriate and it is expensive, which is not going to work. So what else can you do? You can give IV fluids. How long?
Yes.
That's a question.
That's right.
And then again support him with subcut fluids, subcutaneous fluids, which you can give 500 to 1000 ml, up till 1 liter in 24 hours, and then subcutaneous. You can say that these are the options, and there's another option of peg feeding, in which if the patient has, say, for example, a goal. Suppose somebody's marriage is close by and his daughter's marriageable age, or son is marriageable, he wants to buy some time till that time. Yes, we can organize that peg feeding, provided he agrees with it. He won't be able to take it. As long as he can take, let him take. But we can also have this peg feeding. See, most of the people, when they have this rice tube, they have the stigma. They don't want other people to know or see that rice tube and things like that. That is much more humiliating than a peg feed. Because the peg tube they can always hide. So if the patient, even if they don't have money, if we can arrange for the peg tube and financial arrangement for that, that might be able to help. Now, the very fact that we are sit down and we are sitting down and we're prepared to talk through this itself is reassuring for them. It is therapeutic for them, and to just show them that support, and they will feel so that we are working towards their well-being, and they might come around and say yes. We can always explain that it is a good idea to put a peg or an NG, or if they don't have a problem, because that will help him to have pain relief till the end. They can go home and be there and take the medications.
Yes, ma'am.
So it's all about good communication skills.
Yeah, sure, ma'am.
I think we have reached the time, and last chat question. I think there is one question from Dr. Sandeep to
Yeah, please.
still typing. I think I have a question for Dr. Shobha. That's it.
Okay.
Dr. Sandeep,
Not too
can you
difficult, I hope.
and
You
You
can
can speak,
unmute
Dr.
yourself
Sandeep.
and
Yeah.
talk.
Dr. Sandeep, can you speak up?
Or you can send us an email and we'll forward it to Dr. Shobha and we'll get her answer back to you like we do always. Any
One more-
unanswered questions?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, please.
One more question I saw in the chat is Susan John.
Can you hear me now?
Oh yeah. One second, Dr. Sandeep.
Hello?
Just hold on, Dr. Sandeep. 1 second. Susan John has said, is Drausen is acceptable if there is no lower dose available? I didn't get that question. In the sense, if there is a lower than dose that is not, we need to stop those medications. The Drausen is not acceptable. We need to stop those medications instead of trying to find out which is the lower dose that can be given. Is that what you wanted, or am I confused? Yeah.
We did not have IV morphine available, so we had to give oral morphine, but
Yeah.
we could only divide it into 5 mg.
All right.
So we were giving 5 mg 4 hourly, but with that the patient was drowsy.
Right.
But
So don't give 4 hourly. So give it 8 hourly, or even just say, BD.
Okay.
Yeah. So that's why I said you need to space it, and the frequency needs to be reduced, and space it so that and that can be controlled. Or you just make it SOS. Just stop it altogether and make it SOS. When the patient has pain, give it at that point in time. and then calculate 24 hours how many times you've given, and then restart it in that dose.
Okay.
Okay, either a BD dose or TID as the patient tolerates. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's good.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hi, Dr. Shobha. Sorry.
Please tell me. Yeah, no problem. Tell me.
Yeah, in regarding the case discussion,
Yeah.
what's your experience or expertise in what if they're all everything has been addressed about the pain.
Yeah.
If we haven't taken about the psychological status or psychological issue addressed,
Yeah.
and just keep increasing the analgesics or
Mhm.
painkiller opioids in different manners,
Exactly. So
how
that's what
we'll
I
achieve
said.
this situation?
Yeah. So that's what I said in the beginning, that there's a total pain concept, and you have to address the psychological thing and other stuff, which definitely works. So today's topic of discussion was how are we going to titrate opioids for physical pain. That's why I didn't touch on the psychological and social and spiritual aspects of pain, although we just touched it briefly, just mentioned it briefly. Yeah.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah, Dr.
Yeah.
Sandeep, we'll have sessions on psychosocial and spiritual issues taken by the psychologists. So we have divided it so that everyone can stick on to their topic. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much, everyone, for participating.
Yeah, for all your inputs, thank you. You're all prompt and putting in things, so that made it easier. Right, thank you.
Thank you.